comes on. I won't be looking at the comments for now. I'll take a look afterwards when we're done with the practice. But please feel free to comment. Let me know you're on there and where you are. I like that. I think the community part is really important. As I've said all along, is I don't like the term social distancing, and it's been a year. I know for me it was a year yesterday since I closed my studio. And I much prefer physical distancing, but socially we can still be in community. So thank you for joining me this morning in this somatic 11-day practice. My intention with this is to really help you to find a few simple things that you want to do that bring you joy each morning. So if you want to join me on Patreon, I will be I'm sending out daily PDFs of some of the practices and movements that we do. So you'll have those for yourself. On my Patreon channel, it's as little as $5 a month for those PDFs. But otherwise, I appreciate your support and just being here with me in community. So with Tanner's permission, we're going to get started. That's Tanner over there. So we are going to start today. Today is all things pelvis. We're starting from the center of our universe. Every basketball game starts with the tip-off, right? And the tip-off is done by the center. You're going to learn a little bit about basketball in the next 11 days too, because I'm a big fan. So our center in our physical body is our pelvis. So we're going to start in what's called constructive rest posture. The best way to find this is bend your knees and place your feet on the floor, and then lift just one leg, whichever one you want to do first, to 90 degrees. And notice how you're going to align what we call your ASIS, or you can feel your hip bone, with your knee, and then your knee with your ankle. So we don't want the feet narrower than the hips, and we don't want them wider. We have the straight line from the center of the hip to the center of the knee to your middle toe, and then we just set the foot down. And then do the same thing with the other one. So try to align. You should be able to see your big toe when your foot is lifted. If it's too far in, you won't be able to see it if the leg is too far towards the midline. And then set it down. So that's the first part. And this may seem like a lot of work just for a silly little pose, but this is a really wonderful pose to relax and restore your whole body. The next thing we do is feel where your heels are and notice your lumbar spine or your low back. So if you begin to walk your heels away from your buttocks, you might notice that your low back begins to arch. And we really don't want that, because what that's doing is creating compression in the low back. But on the other hand, if I begin to walk my heels inward and you go too far inward towards your buttocks, then you're going to feel your tailbone lift, and it's going to almost feel like pressure of your low back pressing into the ground. So we find that happy space in between. Maybe walk your feet out a little bit, take a small walk on your mat or whatever you're on this morning, and then walk the feet back in. I like to do this anyhow to ground, and that's one of the beauties of this posture, is that we are still grounding ourselves through our feet on the earth. The feet get to be on the earth. And once you've done that, we just relax. I'm going to encourage you for this morning just to place your hands on your abdomen if that's comfortable for you. If not, please take them to your side. If in this position your legs feel like they're getting tired or in any way uncomfortable, what you can do is put a ball or a block between your thighs, but we want to try to avoid letting the legs fall inward. So part of the relaxation for the skeletal system is keeping this alignment of symmetry in the body. So we stay here versus here, or feet being together too close, okay? Enough with constructive rest. Let's invite ourselves into our breath. So the difference to me between doing a somatic movement practice and somatic yoga is I like to include breath in my practice. Begin to breathe into your abdomen in a way that you gently feel your abdomen rise up into your hands as you breathe in. And then allowing the abdomen to soften and relax as you breathe out. There will be a natural recoil of the abdomen on the exhalation and an easeful expansion on the inhalation. You might direct your awareness in the low abdomen, below the navel center, or the upper abdomen above the navel center, Or think of your abdomen like a nice big basketball all the way around the center of the navel. And just explore that area in movement with the breath. Nice, easy flow. So what we start to find in our breath is the first two more obvious parts, which is the inhalation. We've been talking about that. And just notice your inhalation, how long it is. You might even count it out if you want. If you're feeling more left brain this morning and you already had your coffee, then count how long your inhalation is. And then do the same for your exhalation. Just noticing what it feels like, what parts of your body move, what direction your body moves. That's a little more right brain. And then you can also count it out and see how long your exhalation is. So those are the main two parts of the breath, but there's a really important part that we never overlook in this practice, which is the pause. So as you take your next inhalation, notice the space between the inhale and the exhale. There's a point of stillness before the inhalation comes in and becomes the exhalation. See if you can find that point. And that point is a point of fullness and expansion, vitality. We're bringing oxygen into the body, oxygenating all the cells of our body, all the tissues. It actually increases our heart rate. So it's the exciting part for our nervous system and the systems of our body. And then notice the exhalation and find that pause at the bottom of the exhalation, right before the exhalation becomes the inhale. I refer to that as the peaceful pause. There's a sense of emptiness, of release, of purging and purifying. The heart rate relaxes. And then you just float right into the next inhalation. So with no effort. The inhalation is the effortless part of the breath because the way our nervous system is wired, it will tell you when to breathe in, it will tell you when you need oxygen. It doesn't always tell you to breathe out. So minding your way through this practice to try to make sure that you're breathing in and you're breathing out equally. And now that we've found this breath in our abdomen, we're going to do our first movement for the pelvis today, which is very, very simple, but also in so many ways profound. It is by far the most used movement in somatic yoga. There's so many other practices we'll do that require this movement, but it's very subtle. So sense your back body. You can think of your sacral bone, which is that triangular bone just below your lumbar spine where the curve was when we were walking the feet out. And then go all the way down to your tailbone, or you can think of your front body, the upper abdomen, the navel center, and the lower abdomen. And your pelvis is like a bowl that can tip back and forth. So you're going to take a breath in and very gently press your tailbone down into the ground. So what you'll feel is your back will arch, similar to when we walked our feet out. Your low back, your lumbar spine will contract or shorten and arch away from the floor. And then exhale, just let it fall back down. Release it down. So we inhale, press the tailbone down just slightly, create that arch or increase the arch in the low back. And exhale, just let yourself come back to that space of grace where your body's completely supported, where it wants to be. You're not choosing for it or pushing it. So the way I like to describe making these subtle movements is there's two ways to create force in your body. Force is creating muscular action. So one we're experiencing is pushing into with gravity. So as you're inhaling, you're pushing your tailbone down. And then you're exhaling and just letting everything fall. Gravity gets the best of you. The other way to create force is to pull away from gravity. So you might experiment with inhaling and lifting the low back, the lumbar spine, so pulling away from, and then exhaling and releasing into. So play with this, just this one part of the pelvic tilt a few more times, and you can work it out so that you're getting the best range of motion for yourself with the most ease by using just the right amount of pushing into with the tailbone and pulling away from with the low back. And each person's experience is going to be different. What feels right for you, what feels freeing. So we're making the same movement. If we were to take a camera on you, it would look exactly the same. But the brain is reading it differently. Our body maps our movements, and it knows the difference between you thinking I'm going to push down into the ground versus I'm going to pull away from the ground. And these are all very basic things that will come into all of our practices in these 11 days. I'm just going to give you some quiet time to experience that. Noticing the shortening of the low back. And so this is a front to back movement. Low back shortens as the belly expands. And then we're going to take the second half of this pelvic tilt. And so now we are going to start with pushing into, and you want to think of the space above your sacrum, your lumbar spine, and even your lower rib cage. Just feel that where it's touching the ground. As you take your exhalation, your abdominal wall draws in, your abdomen empties. Gently press into the ground with the low back and low ribs. And then inhale, just release. So you're exhaling, belly empties, pressing low back and low ribs down into the ground. So I much prefer you think of all of these practices as moving meditations. Some will be more physical than others, but this one really is more about finesse and a gentleness and an ease. Pressing down into the low back as you exhale. Inhale, just release. So if we want to experience the other type of force that we create, as you exhale, think of slightly lifting away from with the tailbone. So you might create more of a movement there. Inhale, release. So once again, playing with those forces of pushing into with the low back on exhalation and lifting or pulling away from also with the tailbone. And you're going to find just that right combination for yourself on the exhale. If we think of our body again from front to back, the front side is now contracting or shortening, and the back side is lengthening. You should feel a nice stretch, easeful stretch in your low back. Nice way to wake up, right? Take a few more, finding just that way that feels best for you to create the most motion without too much force. And then we'll put this together for the whole pelvic tilting. So now, and if you'd rather take your arms to your sides, please do. I'm kind of just trying to show you what it looks like. Now as you inhale, the tailbone goes down into the floor, the low back arches. You're going to sense that shortening through the low back, the stretching through the abdomen. As you exhale, low back presses into the ground, tailbone lifts. So it's this back and forth. Inhaling, we arch the low back. Exhale, we curl. And that's thinking of it from the point of the low back. Think of it like the pelvis as a bowl. The top of the pelvis is tilting forward and upward as you inhale, and back and down as you exhale. I'm going to give you a moment to take a few more of these. So what we're doing today is called the planes of the pelvis. And this is 3 movements that are really important in that they're the movements we do all the time whenever we're walking. We just don't recognize it. So when we walk, there is what we call anterior and posterior tilt to our pelvis. We want to have that freedom of movement. And that's what you're working on now. And something I might add as you're doing this one is that when we move the pelvis as the center of our universe, it is really a full body movement. So I want you to just notice for a moment your head and neck. Take your awareness into your head and neck and just see if your head is moving at all as you tilt your pelvis. So truly, this is a tail to tongue movement. And when we find freedom in our spine and in our body in general, and part of that is being in this constructive rest pose, you will find that as you inhale, your chin will naturally come towards your chest. So it's like your nose is following your tail. And as you exhale, your nose goes back as your tail lifts, and your tail follows your nose. This is the way our bodies are designed. And if it's not happening, you can help it a little bit. Just gently bring your chin towards your chest as you arch your back on the inhalation, and gently draw the chin away from the chest as you curl your back on exhalation. So the anterior tilt, the pelvis tilting forward and upward, brings the chin towards the chest, and you'll feel a little bit more of your back arch away from the floor. And then as you exhale, notice how the weight goes into the center of the spine as the tailbone lifts and the throat opens. The other way we can experience this movement, the subtlety of this movement, is there's two main curves or primary curves in the spine. We already talked about the lumbar spine and the low back. There's 5 vertebrae, and then we also have your neck. As you're inhaling, you're arching your lumbar, your lower curve, and your upper curve, the neck, is actually lengthening. So you're shortening one curve, the lower curve, and lengthening the other curve. As you exhale, just the opposite. Your lumbar spine is lengthening, and you're increasing or shortening the curve in the neck. So this is the way our body naturally likes to play together. All right, so that's the first movement of the plane of the pelvis. And know that this will, like I said, we'll be doing a lot of other fun things with this. But we're going to move into the next one because we're keeping these videos to 20 minutes, probably half hour. Most of them will be half hour. So the next movement we do is when we walk, there is a rotation in the hips. So what that means is that I can't quite stand up, but one hip, if we step a foot forward, one hip comes forward. That leg that's stepping would come forward, and then the other one comes forward. So we're going to simulate that from being on the ground. And we're going to start with the left hip today. It's the lucky hip. So I'm going to have you place your left hand on your left hip. And sometimes the easiest way to find this initially is by using our leg power, although we're trying to keep the legs relaxed and move from the pelvis, the center of the universe. So just push slightly into your left foot and see if you can lift the left hip off the ground and then let it come back down. If you want to do this to your breath, I like to do the inhalation as the effort and lifting my hip up, and I'm exhaling and coming back down. The other way to think of it is I like to imagine a drop of water in the center of my navel, and I'm trying to lift that left hip and let the drop of water roll over to the front of the right hip. And then I drop the hip down and it rolls back to center. So that's one way to think of creating this rotation of the pelvis. Left hip lifts and then drops. Or we can think of the backside. And as we start to find these muscles truly moving from the pelvis means you're going to feel these muscles on your outer hip. I call them your little glutes and your big glutes in your backside. So we're not using the leg as the power as much, but the pelvis itself. But feel yourself in the back of the pelvis. Notice your 2 butt cheeks and your sacrum in the middle. And as you're breathing in, you'll roll. You'll feel your weight transfer through the top of the sacrum and then into the right hip. Right hip is staying relaxed. And then exhaling, coming back down. So as we did with the other one, different ways of making force. So right now my right hip is relaxed, but I might think of lifting the left hip and simultaneously slightly pushing down into the right hip and then releasing. So that pulling away from and pushing into, you can pull away from with the left hip and push into with the right hip, just to find the right combination for yourself. If we want to add the head and neck to this one, typically the head will turn towards the left shoulder and you'll feel that arching through your whole left side. And exhaling and coming back down. So we're still working with the left hip. And I know some of you out there, because I've done this long enough, are probably doing this and coming way up. It's a really subtle movement, and you'll know that you're trying too hard if your leg muscles are tightening. So it's just a slight rotation, left hip lifts, right hip down. So we're going to call your right hip the 3 o'clock. Your 12 o'clock was the base of your spine when we were doing that arch and curl. Your 3 o'clock was right hip. 6 o'clock is the low back and low ribs when we were doing the arch and curl. And your left hip here that we're working on is your 9 o'clock. That'll make more sense in a moment when we do clock face. Do a few more with that left hip. And then let's see if we can switch sides. And part of this is noticing, we think we look symmetrical because we do, but you're going to find that your muscle pattern, movement patterns may not be symmetrical. One hip might lift with ease and the other one is sticky or even grumpy. And that's some of these things that we work out and find balance back in our body with these very simple, gentle movements. So now right hip, you could even place your hand on the right hip. I imagine having a little string on the front of the right hip. And this is my grumpy hip, so I have to pay more attention. So I'm going to inhale and lift the right hip. If it doesn't happen with the muscles wrapping around the hip to the buttocks and the outer hip, then just give a little push into the right foot and then let it come down. You can think of the drop of water image rolling towards the left hip as you lift the right hip, and then the drop of water rolls back towards your navel center. Or you can feel it from the back. So the ground gives us this opportunity to feel our bodies, to land and locate. It's like setting your GPS. So feel the weight equal on both sides of the pelvis, roll through your sacrum and into the left hip. So we're lifting the 3 o'clock and we're possibly pressing down into the 9 o'clock, the left hip. And just sensing that rotational movement. And as you get better at this and we find those muscles that wrap around the pelvis, the outside and the front side, or the back side, your leg will be more relaxed. It'll be more of a pelvic movement. Your head might turn towards the right shoulder as you do this one. Not forcing it, but letting the head be heavy and rolling. And then coming back to the center. So we're going to do just a few of these alternating hips. And there's a reason I had you start with one side and then the other, because that oftentimes will show us our imbalance, or I like to say finding your flaws. It's good to find your flaws because then we can fix them. So, but now go ahead and let yourself be a little more playful. Inhale, lift that left hip. So left hip comes up, your 9 o'clock, your 6 o'clock presses down. Exhale, relax down. Inhale, right hip. So think of yourself walking. Whichever hip is lifting away from the ground, that's the leg that would be stepping forward. That's that rotation. You got a little swagger in your walk, right? And just playing with this side to side. So now, as a little bonus today, because we've found the pelvic tilting and the side to side, one of the simplest things I do in the morning, and I do this in bed before I get up, is the pelvic clock face. And this one again is more playful, more intuitive, but we're going to move that 12 o'clock tailbone, 3 o'clock right hip, 6 o'clock low back, low spine, and 9 o'clock left hip. So you're going to roll it around in circles. Think of each of those numbers making contact with the floor, with the ground, and you slowly go around. You can go clockwise or counterclockwise. Usually one way or the other is the way that your brain will naturally take you. So take the easier route first, the easier direction, and just playing gently. But again, this is what it looks like when it's overdone and you're lifting your whole back and you're using a lot more force than you need to. It's a really subtle, gentle movement. And take a couple more in whatever direction you're going. The slower we go, the more the brain, so somatics is about rewiring the brain, the more your brain will be able to rewire these movement patterns, because we get stuck in certain movement patterns. And speaking of getting stuck, see if you can switch the direction of the circles. And notice how there's like this moment where the brain has this stop and has to think about it, right? And that's good that it has to think about it, because you're paying attention and you're reestablishing new movement patterns. Okay, so we've got one more movement with the plane of the pelvis that we'll do today. So that was the rotation. We did the arch and the curl and the rotation of the pelvis. And then the last one we do is about a hip lift. So in order to, I'm just going to stay on my knees here, but in order to lift a leg to take it forward, one hip has to lift up. So this is more has to do with our side body muscles, obliques, things like that, is a hip lifts and the other one drops. So from the front, when we walk, there's something like this. It's interesting doing this on my knees, but just to show you, right? So it's a lift. So we're going to simulate that in this third movement of the planes, the pelvis. Still in constructive rest, although between any of these postures, if you feel like you need to hug your knees in and rock, or what we do is take a full body yawn, please feel free to do that while I'm just showing you some of this stuff. Those are two of the basic movements. This full body yawn is a pandiculation. We'll talk about that more later. Stretching and tightening the muscles, and then we sigh and let go, or hugging your knees into your chest. And then reacquaint yourself with that constructive rest. So this time we're going to do the left hip first. So your right leg is going to go out long. And when you take it out long, if there's any arching in the low back where it makes it uncomfortable, then please roll up a blanket or a pillow or something and put it underneath your right leg. So support that right leg. Left foot is still in constructive rest. Now I want to touch base. The movement's going to be on the exhalation. So I'm going to feel my left hip to my armpit. As I exhale, I'm going to draw my left hip towards my armpit. So I'm not lifting my hip up anymore. I'm sliding it on the ground. I'm going to move my arm out of the way. And you'll feel a tightening or shortening through your left waist. Exhale. Inhale, release. Exhale, tighten. Inhale, release. So you're going to sense the shortening through the left side of the body. The left hip is the one that's lifting. So that would be the leg that's stepping forward. But also notice the right side. And my right side is just on vacation. It's totally relaxed. You can shake it out. But even though it's on vacation, it's responding. I can sense how my right side is naturally lengthening. It's lengthening as the left side shortens. And if we want to add a little bit more into this movement, so if you're not finding the slide, and a lot of times it's real jerky at first, because that's yourself, that's your body, it's your muscular patterns that need to reacquaint themselves. So we try to make it smooth, slow motions. But once you found that, or sometimes to help you find that, we can take the left arm to the side and we can add that side body drawing down towards the hips. So think of your armpit and your hip trying to kiss one another as you exhale, and then releasing. Again, I like to turn my head towards the left shoulder. You can actually turn towards either shoulder, see where your head wants to go. But you're shortening your left waist on exhalation. You can even hold it there a few breaths. So these can be done one breath per movement, or just holding and stopping and feeling. And then a complete release all the way that last 20%. So in this practice, you may find that you have one side, very common, one side of the body is tighter and does more work, and the other side is a little bit lazier and needs more strengthening. If you find those things out, it can be helpful to know, because for me, my left side is my weak side, so I really work on strengthening that side, and my right side needs to be stretched. So this particular movement for me on this side feels great. If I want to add more stretching for the right side, you could take your right arm overhead and feel all the way from the right toes to the fingertips. So that's this whole thing with somatics, is we're feeling. There's no goal, it's an exploration. You're feeling your right side lengthen and your left side contract or shorten. And then you're letting it go back to that space of grace. It's early in the morning, so what we say to ourselves, setting the tone for the day. I call all of these my body prayer practices. That intention of whatever comes up, we offer it loving kindness. It's just a discovery. And just notice what that feels like. Checking to see you're trying to keep your left leg relaxed. We're not pushing down into the, so if I'm moving my hip from my leg, I'm going to push and I'm going to feel my hamstrings tighten in the back of the leg. I'm really using these side body muscles. It's if somebody took their finger and grabbed your belt loop and pulled it up towards your armpit. All right, so that's our left side. And another really important thing in somatics is stopping, especially when we're doing these side to side. So you can either come back into constructive rest or take both legs long. We'll just take about 10 breaths to be still. And just notice if you feel any difference in the two sides of your body. Just pausing. So the brain is rewiring, relocating, setting that GPS again. And when we notice differences, try not to label them as right or wrong or good or bad. Use descriptive words, like a leg might feel heavier or longer or shorter or warmer or cooler. One leg might be tired, the other might feel vibrant. Use your terms and just feel, or your hips. Now I'm going to continue facing this way, but we'll do the right side. So your left leg will stay long. If it's pulling on your back at all, you've got that blanket underneath your knee, and your right foot will come in into constructive rest. So now you'll see what it looks like to lengthen the left side. I'm going to feel my right hip, and as I exhale, I'm going to slide or draw my right hip up towards my armpit. You can see how my left hip, hopefully you can see how my left hip is going towards my toes. And then I release on inhale. This was a really sticky one for me for a while. And the sticky, when you find the sticky, that's a good indication that's where your work is. If it's real jerky, the movements, that's signs of what we call sensory motor amnesia, where we know the muscles are there, but they're just not getting the communication they need from the nervous system. So we're going to open up that communication. And how do we do that? By feeling. The only way our body can talk to us is through our felt sense, through sensation. So we're drawing the right hip towards the armpit. If you want to add the right arm reaching towards your toes to really contract, imagine trying to kiss your hip to your armpit, and you'll feel that lateral, so it's a side body bend, and then release. You could let your head turn if you'd like. And you may also be noticing how the left side is lengthening. This is one of my favorites for a muscle called the QL, the quadratus lumborum, which stabilizes your sacrum. And it lets one side contract, the right side right now, and the left side lengthen. If you want to get more lengthen, you can reach that left arm overhead. So a little bit of activity reaching for the left side and contracting through the right side and letting go. Last few movements. Pausing anytime you need to hold a pose at the end range of motion. Sometimes when we hold, we find things that we don't find when we're just moving through it. And then the slow, complete release. Take a few breaths to release. Last one. And then you can bring your legs in again, maybe hug in and give your low back a little massage. Why not? Full body yawn, reach your legs long, hug your muscles to the bones, reach your arms up overhead, your back might arch into a little back bend. Tighten everything, hold it there for a few breaths. You could even squeeze your lips, your eyes, your forehead towards your nose, tighten your muscles in your face, everything you can think of tightening, hug it, and then take an exhale. You can even sigh out your mouth and let it go. Those are the 3 planes of the pelvis. We will each day take a short relaxation afterwards, mostly just to do a body scan. So find your comfortable position. If you haven't been using a blanket underneath your knees, you can stick a blanket underneath your knees. And I'm just going to give you a moment to rest. And as I said, land and locate. Compared to half an hour ago when you woke up, has anything changed? And those changes could be in the physical body, just awareness of spaces in the body, the way your muscles feel, the weight of your bones. We were even stretching the skin, so check your skin. Has your heart rate changed? The way you're breathing. just your awareness of breath. But also notice what stays the same.